John Lennon had already informed the band that he was leaving by the time Paul McCartney became the first Beatle to publicly announce that he would not join them again. Lennon was prepared to embark on a new endeavor with his wife Yoko Ono, as he had grown weary of working with the band. He made the decision to leave McCartney after years of close collaboration. Even though their relationship in the public eye was rocky after the Beatles split, Lennon said that he felt bad about leaving Paul. Lennon left the Beatles first, despite the fact that McCartney was always considered responsible for their dissolution. The band had been coping with long-simmering tensions and resentments, and when Lennon announced his departure, they broke apart. Paul McCartney told BBC Radio 4, "John walked into the room one day and said, 'I'm leaving the Beatles.' And he said, 'It's quite thrilling. It's rather like a divorce.' And then we were left to pick up the pieces." At that particular time, according to McCartney, he had not wanted to leave the Beatles. Paul said, "It was the most difficult period of my life. Number one, the Beatles were breaking up and this was my band, this was my job, this was my life. I wanted it to continue. I thought we were doing some pretty good stuff, you know. Abbey Road, Let It Be, not bad." Despite the fact that Lennon understood it was time to move on and that the breakup was thrilling, he still felt bad about it. He used the phrase, "the walrus was Paul," in the song Glass Onion. This was partially meant to be a mockery about fans who analyzed songs in quest of deeper significance. In the last major interview with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, conducted by New York Times best-selling author David Sheff, John said, "I threw the line in "the walrus was Paul," just to confuse everybody a bit more. And I thought walrus has now become me, meaning I am the one. Only it didn't mean that in this song. It could have been the fox terrier is Paul, you know, I mean, it's just a bit of poetry. It was just thrown in like that." Lennon claimed that even though the sentence was primarily confused on purpose, it also addressed his guilty conscience for ending his collaboration with McCartney. He said, "The line was put in partly because I was feeling guilty, because I was with Yoko and I was leaving Paul. I was trying, I don't know. It's a very perverse way of saying to Paul, you know, here, have this crumb, this illusion, this stroke, because I'm leaving." Paul didn't want to leave the Beatles. He was willing to put up with Yoko's presence if it meant they stayed together. He wanted them to go back to their roots and play small venues, but the others weren't having it. John especially. Paul was devastated when they fell apart. Despite his unwavering commitment to the Beatles, Paul occasionally showed remarkable insensitivity. He was upset by the group's dissolution nevertheless. He withdrew to his Scottish farm, away from the others and the Apple headquarters, where he had once been the most consistently present, and fell into a deep depression. As rumors that he had died spread across America, he spent his days drinking or laying in bed, barely able to function. At last, Linda, his bride, had had enough of the self-pity and rallied him to get back to work, all but putting a guitar in his hands and commanding him to play. The bond between Paul and Linda was a strong one, as she pulled her husband out of a depressive funk to launch his post-Beatles career. He did indeed emerge from the darkness, and he later recounted Linda's help in song with "Maybe I'm Amazed," his first solo classic, issued on his debut, McCartney, in April 1970. John said himself that he formed the Beatles, and he was the one who should break it up. No one in the group really disputed that. Paul and the others eventually concluded that the Beatles couldn't exist without all four of them, and they all needed to move on. The point of it really was that John was making a new life with Yoko, and he wanted to lie in bed for a week in Amsterdam for peace, McCartney said. You couldn't argue with that.
Hello. That was Ringo, folks.
Well, what can I say?
And goodbye to all of them. Well, this is Ringo. Everyone seems to have said everything here, so I'll just sign off by saying cheerio and best of luck from the Beatles.